what are just some Bible verses? Like if someone's watching, let's say someone's watching that knows nothing about prayer, or just a little bit. What are just some Bible passages that come to your mind when you think about prayer?
Well, I guess like a quick overview. This is like a breakdown of Matthew 6. Jesus is like, this is the example of prayer.
Let's go there.
So this is an example of how you could talk to God when you pray. So I'm just going to have just bullet points.
Sure.
So when you're praying, this is Jesus. Jesus said this is kind of like how you should pray. So you pray for who he is, for who God is, for what he has done and is doing in our lives, for forgiveness, for our daily bread, to lead us away from temptations, a door out, for God's will and providence in our life, and for God's glory. So when I go to pray, I don't just always think about food, but like I think about, okay, sometimes I'll be like, good morning, God. And I'll just wake up and be like, I got another breath in my lung. And then I think about who he is and what he's doing for me. And I don't know, that's just kind of the mindset I think Jesus is leading into based off what he said in Matthew 6.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at how in Matthew 6, I'm there. Look at how in verse 8, what does he describe? Of course, it's all through chapter 6 and other passages, but he describes, therefore, do not be like them. In previous, he's talked about the Pharisees and the hypocrites, how they prayed. For your Father knows. I mean, he's described as a father.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad, yesterday, my dad called me. Why? We didn't really have anything we needed to talk about. He just wants to talk.
It's like, just like you said, like God, and you said it too, like God knows what we're thinking, but he wants to hear from him. Like you said, like when your kids come up to you, you know what they need, they need food, but you want them to talk to you.
Yeah, I don't have to wait for my 2-year-old to ask me for some food before I know that he needs to be fed.
Yeah.
I don't rely on him to give me the cues for those things. Like I know better. I know what he needs. It's still nice when he talks to me though, and he asks for something, or he says thank you, or whatever the case may be. He's at that point now where he's starting to talk more, and I can appreciate that more from him. I got that with Annalise too.
Yeah.
My daughter is named Annalise, and my son is named Edward, for those who don't know. But that's a great feeling that you get. You know what they need. You know what they desire, even outside of their just needs. But it's always nice when you give it to them, and they say, thank you so much, I love you, Daddy. Whatever the case is, they give you that hug. They express their gratitude. Part of prayer is that. Part of prayer is, we keep talking about having a relationship with God. I mean, really, it's not this like mystical idea of a relationship. It's really a relationship. You have to communicate in some way or another. Yes, he communicates to us through the scriptures right now. That's the only way that he's doing that. But he wants us to talk to him too. He wants us to speak and hear from us.
There's a story. When I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, if this young guy ever watched, his name's Manuel, right? And so Manuel had just been baptized, and he came up to me at, like, it was a youth devotional, and he came up to me, and he was like, hey, I want to pray. I was like, that's great. He's like, I want to talk to God. I'm like, that's so great. And so I was like, you just need to just talk to God. And he goes, okay, great. So he's so excited to pray, which to me, it was like refreshing. It was like, sometimes you see little things and you're like, I should be more like that. So he walks away, and he came running back to me like, I mean, he's probably 14, 13. He came running back to me like 10 seconds later, and he went, Aaron. So he said, how do I pray? And I was like, that's a great question. And so we opened to this passage in Matthew 6, because what did the disciples ask Jesus?
You tell me.
How do we pray?
Yeah.
Teach us to pray.
Yeah.
And so Manuel was like, I want to talk to God. And then he came back and said, how do I do it? I was like, wow, what a good question. And so that's what Jesus discusses in Matthew 6, is he teaches them what to pray for.
He gives you a good outline.
Yeah.
A good outline of some priorities and things
right.
to be thinking about, things that you ought to be praying for.
Yeah.
And they include things like your necessities. They also pray and include things, well, I guess for us today, we might pray that God's kingdom be spread or something like that.
Yeah.
But some of it is giving glory back to God.
Yeah.
Recognizing who he is for you.
Yeah.
Some of it has to do with forgiveness. Forgive us our debts. And it also throws a reminder in there that there's a standard by which if we want our debts forgiven, we have to forgive others.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good things in there. It's just kind of an outline that gives you priorities. When you're praying, keep these kind of things in mind.
And if someone's watching and you say, look, we're not going to be able to cover everything on prayer in a 28-minute lesson, but just go read Matthew 6.
Yeah.
You'll read in Matthew 6, and we'll probably end up back in Matthew 6, but Matthew 6 talks about how you're supposed to do things not to be seen of other men. That doesn't mean you can't pray publicly. When we go out to eat lunch, we pray publicly. But I don't stand up on the table and say, "Dear Lord, thank you for," that's not, we're not doing it to be seen of men, right? Daniel prayed in his closet, right? Well,
Yeah.
he didn't pray in his closet, but he opened his thing and prayed towards Jerusalem. That's why they threw him in the lion's
In
den.
the secret place? No, we're talking about, I was referring to Matthew 6:6.
Yeah, Matthew 6 is saying, hey, go ahead. You want to
Oh.
read that?
Actually flipped.
Okay,
Flipped away from
flipped
it, but
away. Yeah, Matthew, I've got it. Matthew
Yeah.
6:6. This is starting in verse 5. When you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites. We did a whole episode on hypocrites. That word is under judging. It's hupo from under and krino from judge. And so it's these people in the Greek culture who are actors. They acted like one. So you might go out publicly and play the actor, praying loud like you're so holy, but then you don't follow through in your life, right?
Yeah.
Don't pray like that. When you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites. They love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. That's the purpose they're praying.
Yeah.
Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Verse 6, but when you pray, go into your room, and when you've shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place. The word place not in Greek, but it's idea. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. When you pray, do not use vain repetitions, as the heathen does, for they think they will be heard for their many words.
Yeah, I think God just wants you to be like, hey, I need you. Like, I need you right now. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's you conversing with God. Okay, here's a question we actually got from someone else that can kind of mix in. Do prayers, what about the length of a prayer? Do they have to be can they be long? Can they be short? Do they have to be?
Well, Daniel shows that it can be short,
Yep.
right? When he stood before the king, he was summoned to give an answer, and he prayed just before he answered.
Nehemiah 2:4 talked about that too.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
I think it is.
It is probably.
But Daniel prayed consistently. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just know that Nehemiah 2:4 is one example. There may be one in Daniel.
But either way, he
Yeah.
stood there and he prayed quickly before he gave the answer. The point is, he didn't stand in the throne room for 5 minutes, get down on his knees, and say this, long, drawn out kind of prayer. Not that 5-minute prayer is even that long necessarily, but the point is, I mean, he just did it in the blink of an eye. He did it in his head.
Yep.
He did it without speaking or being obvious, but he prayed.
Nehemiah 2:4. You've got Nehemiah. He's in the presence of King Artaxerxes. Okay, and the king could basically see that he was sad in his presence before, and he says, "Why are you sad?" Verse 2. Verse 4. The king said to him, what do you request? Verse 3. He says, "Hey, my city of Jerusalem's in ruins." And the king says, "What do you request?" Now listen to this. "So I prayed to the God of heaven." Verse 5. "And I said to the king." So he said a little. I can imagine if you're King Artaxerxes.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're King Artaxerxes, it's almost like Scott says, "What do you request?" And I'm like, "Okay, here we go. Oh boy, Lord, please watch." Like it's not a. I mean, how long would you stand? Would you say, like, "Excuse me, King Artaxerxes, let me bow in prayer"?
That's a good thing. Good.
Are you going to do that?
Yeah,
Or it's quick.
I think that the way that some people use phrases today are inappropriate, but that they came from a proper place. And what I mean is, like, you might hear people say, "God help me." Well, there is a sense in which you could say that in your own head, and you're in this kind of situation
That's right.
that we're talking about
And it's
here.
not irreverent.
It's not. You're actually
it's reverent.
speaking to God.
You're
You're
actually
actually asking
requesting
for His
it.
help.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like the phrase "thank God." You can say that in a reverent manner where you are serious. Now, it's not some flippant thing that you say, right? You have to be careful the way you use it. You
Well, what
shouldn't
you-
use the Lord's name in vain.
Yeah, what you were saying also could lead into another, like, so, like, if he's standing there and he goes, like, "Help me, Lord," if he took, he didn't bow down, so it could lead into, like, how should you pray, and, like, should you,
The positions
the
of prayer.
positions of prayer. Should I get on my knees?
That's good. I didn't
Yeah.
think about that.
Well, you've got, I mean, I think
I think it was standing probably when he did it, right?
likely, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
or kneeling before the. I don't know,
Possibly.
but I think you're probably right. I think it's probably standing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like open eyes prayer. You
Yeah.
know, like open eye prayers. Like there's lots of times where we're driving down the highway and we'll be talking about something, and my wife's like, "We should pray for that." I'm driving.
Yeah, don't have
Obviously, I don't
closed.
close my eyes, right?
Yeah.
So we'll basically just say a prayer, eyes open. I mean, you can talk to God with your eyes open, but
Yeah, I don't know anywhere that regulates that particular part. We
no.
do it, but
We do. I think it's just because you focus. When you close your eyes, you're not looking around, looking at everybody else in the auditorium or your group. But let's talk about prayer postures. All right. So, what are some different postures?
well, standing, sitting, kneeling, laying
Yeah.
is the only that I can think of.
Well, I mean, I mean, if a New Testament passage, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 8, "I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere." That everywhere is a couple words in Greek, it's in every place, and it's 4 times in the New Testament. It means anywhere spiritual people are gathered, the men should be leading the prayers. Now, if men are not present, then women can lead. I mean, but the men are supposed to be, according to God, those who lead the prayers. I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere. Then this next phrase has caused a lot of confusion. Lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. When it says lifting up holy hands, your hands aren't holy, right? It's like in Proverbs 6, it hates certain haughty eyes. Are my eyes literally prideful? No. It's the way, it's the mind, right?
Yeah.
So when you lift up holy hands, your hands aren't holy. It's talking about a person with a holy life. They have hands.
That's a good point.
And so somebody would say, well, hey, should we lift hands in worship today? Well, number one, this passage is talking about prayer, right? So there are lots of prayer postures in the Old Testament. It's not inherently wrong, but I don't do it because I think it kind of causes confusion and draws attention to myself.
Yeah.
But like if you look in the Old Testament, I mean, I've got some different passages here, like you said, if someone wants to look it up. They did raise their hands in 1 Kings 8:22, Psalm 28:2. They also would lay down. They were made standing, 1 Samuel 1:26, kneeling, 1 Kings 8:54, lying down, 1 Kings 18:42, audibly, silently, bowing the head, Genesis 24:26, and with uplifted eyes looking towards God, John 17:1. That was Jesus. Lots of different prayer postures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes people think the Bible only says like this and but
When you read a lot of these, you're just reading incidentals. Like this is
That's
just
right.
incidentally how they
How they
were
did
when
it.
they were doing it.
That's exactly right.
The point is they were respectful and they addressed deity and they prayed for the right things and not so much how they held their head.
That's exactly right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Authentic Christian Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Gospel Broadcasting Network, or GBN for short. You can hop on the App Store, search Gospel Broadcasting Network, and you can download the app. And there's this show, many other great shows that you can watch or listen to. Start learning more about the Bible and why we're here, what our purpose is.